I have thought for the day. So this is my last thought for the day for the year 2019, and so I don't know. I was thinking. I had told this story at one of the probation camps on Sunday, so I'm going to just tell it because I think it captures kind of what happens here and what our hope is. So years ago, I took two homies named Marcos and Juan, and they were from enemy neighborhoods actually. And I took them to Helena, Montana, to speak at a school, a university. And so they had never flown before, so they were hanging on to each other, enemies, rivals, locked arms like two viejitas on the roller coaster at Six Flags. And they were, every 2 minutes, hi Dios mío, hi Dios mío. It was a thrill to watch them panicked in the sky. And then, so then we arrived in the middle of the winter in Helena, Montana, and it was snow on the ground. And so they were just thrilled. They'd never seen snow before. So I remember we had a whole afternoon where I got sleds, and they just had a childhood that had been denied them, and they just slid down snow and slopes and stuff. And then we had the talk. It was only one talk, and it was before the talk, the local newspaper, like the Helena Gazette or something, wanted to interview the three of us, so they did. And then they wanted to take a picture of us, so the three of us, and it was cold. So we were wearing our beanies that said Homeboy Industries and our big heavy jackets that said Jobs Not Jails, Homeboy Industries, and we were shivering in the snow, and they took a picture of us. And then they got up and spoke, and they were very vulnerable. They really told the real deal, stories of terror and torture and violence and abuse of every imaginable kind. They were quite honest. And if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance, otherwise you might get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. And so they talked about how they had chosen at Homeboy Industries to transform their pain so they didn't have to inflict it anymore. And they got a standing ovation. People really received who they were. So the next day we were flying home, and I get up really early, so we were staying in this old hotel. Well, I opened my door, and there is a newspaper right in front of my door, and it's the Helena Gazette, and it has a picture of the three of us freezing our butts off in the snow, and a color picture, huge, above the fold, and it says, "Homeboys bring hope to Helena." Then I look down the hall, and every single room in the hotel has the newspaper, like they do sometimes, in front of their door, and I think, wow, these guys are gonna just be surprised when they wake up and see their picture on the front page. So I told them to meet me at 7:30 for breakfast, and they show up for breakfast, but they jacked all the newspapers. And so did you see this? I said, yes. And so they packed all these papers somehow in their bags. And so then we went to the airport. Oh my God. It was like, oh, we saw you on the newspaper, and shaking their hands, and people asking for selfies, and we're so proud to know you, and all that kind of stuff. We get to the TSA guy, and he asks for a selfie, which I'm sure is not permitted. And so, and then we get on the plane, a small plane, and then, the flight attendant on the loudspeaker says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have two celebrities on board," and everybody bursts into applause. And so we fly home on this tiny plane, and there's a kind of a single row, and I have the seat over here, and then there are just two seats on that side, and they're sitting over there. And at some point we're, high above the clouds, and it's incredible, snow-capped mountains. And I'm looking out the window. I said, I got to tell these guys to look out. And I look over, and by the window seat is Juan, but he's knocked out, leaning on his enemy's shoulder, drooling, sound asleep. And then there's Marcos, and he's crying. And he has the newspaper on his lap, and I said, why are you crying? And he says, it's this article. And I said, what about it? And he says, it gets to me. It makes me think I am somebody. And I leaned across the aisle and I said, that's because you are somebody. Here's how it works here. You take a good hard look at what's happened to you, and maybe even what you've done. And you surrender to the healing of this place, and you transform your pain so you don't have to inflict it anymore. And then you know the truth of who you are, that you're exactly right. You are somebody. And then you go from feeling cherished to wandering right into that joy that comes from cherishing yourself and your kids and each other. So Merry Christmas, and let's make 2020 an excellent year.